Hi, welcome to Stories of Art. My name is Karel Huidkoper. Today I'd like to tell you something about one of the many love affairs that Jupiter had in what we consider Roman and Greek mythology. Um, Now this is a story I'm going to tell in various parts, in two parts actually, in two different videos. So um, the smart thing to do would be, if you like this video, to just subscribe on the button below, and you won't be missing the other one. Anyway, let me get started by showing you a painting that I was going to talk about. This is a painting by Correggio. It's in the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna, and it is a painting of the 16th century, so we're talking about the High Renaissance or even later. And I am going to be talking to you about mythology from the viewpoint of the Renaissance. That is, not of that of ancient days. You have to imagine, at some point, all these stories about Zeus, Jupiter, and Venus and Aphrodite were a serious religion. These gods were feared or loved or appeased, and serious people believed in them. There were pious people loving their gods. And that's sort of hard to understand for us today, because most of the stories that we know are about Zeus falling in love, or Jupiter falling in love and dropping everything and just running after some girl or nymph or whatever, and getting into trouble. We, I have to admit, don't really know exactly how all these stories fit in with their actual religion. We do know that in many cases, serious people objected. Plato always objected to these stories. He didn't like them. But they were written down, and one of the books that was written about them was written by Ovidius, a Roman who wrote it in the first decade of our calendar. And he wrote this book, The Metamorphoses, in which he described all of history as it happened throughout mythology, from the very beginning up until the murder of Caesar, so his own time really. That happened in his youth. And in that he described many of these stories, and he wrote them well and entertaining. And that book, his book, was read throughout medieval times, just not by that many people, but it still existed by the time it became popular again in the Renaissance. And then people really started to publish it and print it, and you could find them everywhere. Then these stories, without any religious context, became the basis of a literary tradition, and they became the stuff people would make paintings of, sculptures, but also plays and books and poems and operas and whatever. And it's important to understand this is not the religious context. If I show you examples of the ancient world, they actually believed these were depictions of gods. And that's a very different way of doing things. Anyway, here we have Correggio. And Correggio painted this lovely painting of Io, the most beautiful nymph that ever lived. She was so beautiful that the god, the king of all the gods, actually fell in love with her, Jupiter. I usually use the Roman names because Ovid was a Roman. He used Roman names. Jupiter, of course, cheated on his wife Juno all the time, and he had recently promised her he would never ever do it again, and immediately fell in love. Dropped everything, and now he had to hide. He had to disguise himself so Juno would not see. So what did he do? He disguised himself as a cloud. That cloud descended on the earth and enveloped Io, who was just sitting somewhere, probably next to a river. He enveloped her, and that's what we see here. You can see this cloud that has almost an arm around her, And you can also see she kind of likes it. She grabs the arm back. This is not an abduction of someone who doesn't want to. She really loves this idea of this cloud coming towards her. And if you look closer, you can see that there's a face coming out of the cloud, and it kisses her. You can also see more closely how she actually grabs that arm that holds her. And in the entire picture, you can also see she actually lifts her heel. She's pushing upwards towards this cloud. She's into this thing. Now, let me show it to you a little bit closer up. Her heel, of course, but also on the right, you can see this sort of vase that's standing there. That's a sort of grown into the surroundings. That's a reference that Correggio made to a river, because that's how river gods were depicted in ancient times. This is a river god in the collection of the Vatican Museum. It's from either the 1st century before or after Christ, and it's probably the river Arno, so the river that runs through Florence. And river gods were depicted as usually as old men, elderly men with long beards, and they had a vase, sometimes a very big one where they lean on the vase, and sometimes, in this case, he holds it, and usually water pours from it, because that's the source of the river in a sort of pictorial way. And this is her father, because the vase, as we see it, her parents were two minor gods. Her father was a river god, and her mother was an oceanid, so sort of an ocean nymph. She was then, Io, was sort of abducted. Zeus, Jupiter, took her away to, well, whatever place he usually used to entertain his, let's say, guests. And that's where things started to go terribly wrong. Now, that's where we go into this painting, but that I'm going to explain to you in the next video. So if you liked it, be sure to click subscribe, and maybe even hit the little bell, then you get notified anytime I post a new video. So bye for now, and see you in the next video. Bye.